Plug in my pacer.
Good evening. How are you
yes.
guys?
Okay, there.
What a way to start an evening. What a way to start an evening.
How
I
was
needed
your
this. We were craving this. Sherry and I were just waiting to see the two of you together again.
I'm going to let Renee speak, though, for an hour and 59 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, right. Sure he is.
he'll be going like this.
No. He's funny.
Yeah, well, welcome everyone. It's been such a pleasure to have welcome back Grandmother Renee and Grandpa Neil, and nice to see you too, Jody. It's been a long day for everyone, but we're so glad that we have the final of our day with you two. It's beautiful, and we're so happy that you're back. Remembering when, and we had lots and lots of comments and lots of requests asking when Grandma Renee and Grandpa Neil are coming back. So we're happy that you're back, and we're happy that you're able to stay with us for two hours. And welcome. Take it away, Jody.
I get amazed with like 2 hours that you can sit around and find things to talk about. But then again, I talk fast. I get to the point. I'm just, so this is really wonderful for me. I am excited to just rest and listen.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Resting and listening.
Yeah. Have a nice chat. We love you.
Will. Yeah, it is so refreshing to be a part of your day. Thank you for visiting us. It is the evening, and this is a time when dishes were done and everything was put away, and the teapot was on the stove, and it was time to sit around, and we would have the cola lamp, and it was just nice and cozy, especially after the snow came. Oh, it was so relaxing, and everybody quite different from today. People just rushed to the TV, but a long time ago, we knew as soon as dishes was done and the table was cleared, and we would sit there. We would either have board games, or we would just sit there with our tea and talk about what had happened over the week or whatever. And it was the most beautiful thing, because someone would knock on a door and in come a neighbor just wanting to come and catch up on the news, because this is how we used to do it. And it was so healing to have neighbors to pop in, and people out of the blue, people would, sometimes they're thinking about you, and out of the blue, they pop in at your door, and we sit there and we would talk. But it was a time of also learning about genealogy. And genealogy was very important to our people. It was to remember where you came from, and your family. And so it was almost a time of recording, and it was all done by memory. Remember, this is how my grandmother would say, remember this now. You're younger than me, and I want you to remember this. And so we would hear who came home, or who left the reserve, or who had children, or who went off to university, or who went, those interesting things. And it was amazing because, it wasn't just 2 hours. Sometimes we would be there till about 1 o'clock in the morning, because if a visitor came, we would spend that time and just sharing the knowledge. Especially at this time when we would see that first snowfall, we would all be talking. Oh, looks like our mother, the earth, she needs more. But at this time, I looked out there and I saw the snow this morning. How many appreciated it? How many grumbled? You see, we forgot why that blanket of snow came. What have you been asking for? Remember, what you've been asking for is that virus to be stopped. So she heard our voices. She heard our voices. And this is what the old people would sit there and they talk about. Oh, Mother Earth had to come back again and to help us, to protect us. And so when I saw the snow out there, oh, I was happy, because that snow, that blanket of snow, was to put down that virus that's airborne out there. Science. They're trying to say all these things about science. And science was our knowledge of the indigenous creation of all what we would call our Mother Earth's gifts. And they would be always telling us a story. And so when we would have a visitor come in, they would talk about their journey of what they saw, what Mother Earth was telling them. And so, how many of you heard the frogs singing? Well, when they start to sing, it's time to, we have to get up and we have to brush ourselves off. We have to get ourselves ready. We already knew that there was snow coming, because if we look at the stars too, they tell us things. And so it was a time to get your land ready, your garden, your earth. Get that ready, because a couple more times we're going to have this snow. We had this snow right up to 24th of May. And this is when our people knew that after 24th of May, then you can start planning. You know, we get caught up when that warm weather comes. We want to put up our flowers. We want to dig up those beds and bring up the flowers and be anxious for that change. But Mother Earth says, wait a minute. I got a couple more times to come back and check on you. And that's a nice song. The songs, you can imagine how the frogs are singing there, then all of a sudden they got to go and hide again. But you know what? They don't have no heat. They don't have a roof over their head. They just bury themselves deeper into that mud, and they get ready for that song to sing, because they know what they have to do. And so it's very important when we visit. And so I'm so grateful that you come to visit us and to sit with us and to hear how it used to be. Remember when. So I'm going to turn it over to our other grandpa here, this grandpa, and let him share of his visiting times a long time ago.
Oh man, I used to remember. When you were talking, grandmother Renee was talking about the visiting times, and that's true. There were a lot of visiting. A lot of us kids would still be playing like daytime now. Back in the day when I was living with my grandparents, we'd be already in bed by 7.
Mm-hmm.
We'd already be in bed by 7 because little ones weren't allowed to stay up too long. They wanted you to have that rest. And I think it's because of the way you played all day, what you did and all this. And I used to hear people coming into my grandma's house before I'd fall asleep, and they'd all talk. So I'd be listening. And I would listen to them, and I'd hear them. My grandmother would make the tea, put something out, and I hear them talking away. And the next thing I know, I'm sleeping. It's the voices, I think, that really put me to sleep, of the visitors that came to my grandmother's house, my grandfather's house. And when I think about that, when I'm hearing Grandmother Renee talk about those, I hear the voices of the old ones speaking. We called them Gekanan, our old ones, when they used to come to visit. And back then, we didn't have to lock our doors.
Yeah.
We had a homemade screen door. We had screens all around the windows. And those windows remain open all night to let the air through, come through the house. And the mosquitoes would be out, but they wouldn't, they would make sure that there were no mosquitoes in the house because the little ones were there. Oh, me and my sister were little back then. And, it was something, all you hear was the knock on the screen door. Oh, Bibin, again, come on in, they'd say, come on in. Madabin. They'd sit down. Tea, come na koemen. Mga banggi scan. Tea and scan they'd have.
Mm-hmm.
and they would dip that baked bread or scone into the tea. That's how they would. That's how they would eat that. That's how they would do that. And I remember my when we were actually downstairs before we went to bed. The people would, there'd be some visitors come once in a while, but it wasn't all the time. But when we look outside, we'd see my grandfather, his brother, in the garden. They're looking at the growing, not at the growing time, but already in the summertime. But when you're getting ready to, you see all the food in there, and I used to watch them. They would be talking the language. There would be no English in there at all, and they were talking with the plants. I think that's what I think it was they were doing. They were in the garden. They were all talking, and they were looking at these, bending down and lifting the leaves a little bit, and they're talking at the same time. And I don't know what they. I know I couldn't hear them properly, but I could hear them. I know they were talking, and I kind of think they were talking to the plants. That's what I think. And when you touch them, because you have to have the feel of the plant, and the feel of the plant needs you to feel it, and then the plant feels you at the same time. And that's what I see. That's what I seen when grandmother Renee was talking, and talking about that. Talking about people coming to visit, and then we'd go visit.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be walking right after supper. Everything was done. The grandparents, they'd go visit somebody. We'd go with them. We'd play with the kids. All of a sudden, 8 o'clock coming, we were brought into the house, and we listened to me and the kids would, the children that where we went to visit, or the kids that we went to visit, where we play with them in the living room while they were talking in the kitchen. And then you could hear my grandfather, and how I was going. He'd say, it's getting darker outside. So that was a signal to go home, to our own home. And then, so finally my grandfather picked me up, and my grandmother picked my sister up, and they carried us through the bush in the darkness. They were talking. Well, then I would fall asleep on my grandfather while he was carrying me. Oh, that was beautiful. But to hear the voice, while him and my grandmother were talking, walking up the dark trail. There was no lights. There was no flashlights. There was nothing like that. They knew exactly where they were going, where they were stepping. That little trail that cut through. And back then, everybody used to cut across people's yards. There was nothing wrong with that. Because you want to go from point A to point B, or point A to point C, you cut across somebody's yard. They didn't mind. Their doors were open. So we'd get home. I don't remember getting home, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the morning with my grandparents. 6 o'clock maybe, because we went to bed. And we'd go down and get ready. My grandmother would make sure we washed our face, got our teeth done. I think we had toothbrushes. Unless they're homemade. No. Porcupine quills.
The twins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, we'd get ready again for another day. We'd get ready for another day. And my grandparents, they went back outside. They did whatever they did, and we did but they'd always look up. Like I remember telling you all this once before when we were playing. And they were in the garden doing the gardening and stuff. They'd always pop their heads up, make sure we were okay. And then as I grew older, a lot of that the screen doors were still there when they didn't have to lock the doors. I think I was probably around, that I remember anyway, is about 10 or 11. They stopped doing that, because people were coming into people's homes and taking their food. That's when things changed. I was about 10 or 11 years old around that time. And, when I remember all that, like everybody trusted each other. That trust was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes, if nobody was home and they wanted to borrow something, they'd wait. They wouldn't go in the house and get it. They'd wait and, come back and, oh, good album, wish begun. And they would say, sugar, want to borrow some sugar.
Yep.
How the the moon, they would say too. You know what? If they would ask, what do you need? Then my mom would say salt. Aha, fuego. Let me go home first. He'd go back and get his salt and bring it over. That's the trade.
Mm-hmm.
Salt for sugar, or flour, something. And that's how those things used to work. And barter system. That's what our people lived on, was that barter system, right? Trading with each other. Can I have some of that? I'll give you some of this. Okay. And there was no exchange of money, because everybody needed something. And when you needed something and you had it, you would share it. That's the way it used to be. That's the way. I still do it here. We still do it around in my community. Some of us still do it. Hey, Neil, you got any bread? Yeah, I got some. Come and get one. Okay. Next thing you know, you hear the car door open, close, and I give my bread and I'll get you later. Okay. And that's the way it still is, some of us, for us old guys. No, I'm not that old. I'm like I said, I'm probably about 10, 15 years younger than Grandma Renee,
I know you're wearing boots now.
One of these days, I want to get close to Grandma Renee, and she's going to give me a spiritual slap. But again, like I said, yeah. And it's important to remember some of these things as you grow up, because there's a lot of good memories there. For me, anyway, because I guess with Grandma Renee too, and what she grew up with, and what I grew up with, and the language. When people are speaking the language, boy, there was no English. There was none. And everybody knew exactly what they meant. And that's how I learned. That's how I learned my language, is through that. My grandparents speaking the language all the time. It was never English, unless we went to school. But again, like I said, it's one of those things that I'll always remember, is my grandmother. Just before we go to bed, my sister would be, my grandmother would rock me in a cradle, in the rocking chair. And every time I hear that sound of the creaking rocking chair, it reminds me of my grandmother holding me, and they're listening to an old battery operated radio. The music was not loud, it was soft. And I remember some of the music on there, and some of those big band music, say, from the 30s and 40s. Some 50s, well, mostly around there. And then they would listen to a station called CBC, and I remember that, listening to the news. And but that rocking chair one was one of the greatest memories. Like I hear a creak somewhere, or a creaking of a rocking chair. I think of my grandmother rocking me in that chair, holding me in her arms till I fell asleep. And my grandmother would say, "Ahaw, ashko na ba ma." Then that's what she would say to my grandfather. She would say, "Oh, okay, he's falling asleep. He's fell asleep already." Then I could feel my body being picked up by my grandfather. Take me upstairs and cover me up. Make sure I was safe. Make sure my sister was safe. And those things are precious.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are precious, because you never forget. And the things that we used to remember when people come to visit. And I used to get laughed at sometimes by people from Rama, because when my mom was from Rama, and we used to go there to visit my grandfather there in Rama. And every time we went there to see him, oh man, that was beautiful. The houses were not like what they are today. And every time we come riding in there, we'd see three old guys sitting against the wall. One of them was my grandfather with his 3 buddies. I guess they were his army buddies. And when we got there, he'd get up and look and that big smile. He'd see us coming in. Yo, he'd say, "Kidogoshnum, you got here." And we'd run to him and he'd hug us. And then first thing we did, got our stuff out and we started playing. First thing my grandfather did was go to the cupboard, got us some cookies. And it was always the same, always the same. He never left us out, we never left his sight. We stayed right, he told us not to go anywhere, just stay here where I can see you. He'd say, "Ma bachi, play around here." And that's what we did. Then I have a cousin that used to hang around with all the time when we used to go to Rama. And there was a trail that ran from my grandfather's house to his house. I'd see him coming because he'd be looking out the window to see who pulled in at Grandpa's. Then they'd see us and they'd come over. And, and we'd play all day. Then my grandfather would take us to I forget, what did they call those little hamlet, I guess they call them. They're like a little town, but they're not a town. Like a little village, one store, a few houses, stuff like that. We'd go to the store and we'd get in the car, he'd tell us to sit still, but we'd be looking out the window and he'd go buy stuff. Oh, man. My grandfather from Rama would go buy his stuff, but he'd tell us not to eat it all. And every time we left there, every time we come home back to the island, I always missed him because, and those were the things, those good times and real great times I had with my grandfather and my uncles actually too, because they lived with my grandfather and they'd be watching out for us. And my mom would be so happy. And then she would be cooking and then my grandfather would tell her to sit down. He would tell the boys his sons to cook because we were visitors. And that's another thing. That's another thing I remember growing up too. When you bake something, I don't know, for some reason or other, somebody bakes a pie. You got 2 people coming over. How do they know they made a pie? But as soon as they come knocking on the door, you hear the knock. Bean cake. That's what my mom would say. They would all be talking in the kitchen or they'd go into the living room while we played outside. But we were a little older then. We were living, we went to live with my mom and her new husband. So we'd be playing outside while they were talking inside. But there was no more that going to sleep at 7 o'clock at night. There was no more waking up with the grandparents or mom and dad early in the morning. Everything was starting to change now. A new leaf in the cover of our life was changing. It turned a new page over, and you started another journey. And but people used to come around and come and drink tea. My aunties would come over there and drink tea with my mom and dad, or she'd make some bread. She'd tell me to run this over to my other auntie. And we'd have baked bread, and I'd have, what was that? You wouldn't let me drink tea. I was too young for tea, they said. So we just had water. Or even milk if we had it. And that was something. But those memories of people coming to visit, and they're laughing, Oh man, it's overwhelming the way they laughed. You could hear them talking because we understood the language. They're all talking in the language, man. Or sometimes they'd sit outside outside and bring the chairs outside, and they'd sit outside because it was hot inside. Because we had those what they called them, tar paper shacks. And it's funny how those houses lasted. They're government houses, right? but they were cold. But again, like I said, they would go outside and they talk outside, oh, pretty much into the dark. How binigay when the bak, they'd say. This was already just before it got dark. It's between dark and day. You're right in that middle, that line. And we binigay. You know, I was going to get we the big cut. They'd say, to go inside. It's getting dark. Remember, we weren't allowed to stay out any longer than 9 o'clock at night. When the night began, that's when you went in. And there's stories around that. They got stories around that. That's when those spirits come out, and they look for children to play. And you have to go in. So again, like I said, that page, that new leaf in our life. When we went to live with my mom and dad, her husband, we left my grandparents, and my grandparents moved to Oakville. But I'll never ever forget the being held, being carried, being hugged. If I got hurt, they'd yell at me for a minute, but then they say, "Oh, nah," they feel sorry for me after. My grandmother would pick me up and dust me off. I feel good that way, And the other day, a couple of weeks ago, maybe, I was thinking about my grandma. Cause I take a trip I go up to the graveyard once in a while, go visit at my wife's grave, and I talk to my mom at the same time, and my dad, and the other relatives that are there. And they say sometimes it's good to do that, to talk to the ones that are in the graveyard. Sometimes it's good to talk, not to look down at them, but looking up, because they're up there now, not down there. But the spirit comes to visit while you're standing there too. So, yeah, that's what happened when I grew up, and I always wish I could go back to that time and live that over again, because times were good. Mind you, we didn't have a lot of money, we didn't have a lot of food.
No.
But you know what? They managed to put everything together so we would eat. And that's the beauty of it, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And then I used to watch everybody, how they gathered their food, getting ready for the winter. When nobody planted anymore at the island, it was my mom and dad who I watched bring things home. It was always 4 cans of something, always 4. And when we, and then they'd cover it up because the house was so cold, they didn't want it to freeze. It would, other blankets, wrap them all the canned stuff up so it wouldn't freeze. And then the flour, baking powder, salt, sugar for the winter. We had scone. We had scone for breakfast, lunch, and supper. The next day, we had scone, breakfast, lunch, scone for every day. But bread was one thing that they bought it.
Mm-hmm.
But when we didn't have the proper refrigeration stuff, that back then it went bad pretty quick. But so we had to eat toast and eat that white bread. But we'd also go back to the scone. I'd ask my mom, "Mom, make some fried scone." Okay, amigo, that sounds good. She'd say. She'd make the fried scone. We'd have our supper time. And some people don't believe, but when I talk about this bologna thing that we had, and bologna was one of the staple meats back then, right?
It was our steak.
It was our Ojibwe steak or Mohawk steak or Haudenosaunee steak. It was a steak. Oh,
yeah.
And then, I could just feel it there. When I cook bologna, I get a bunch of herbs and spices. I massage the bologna so delicately. No, I'm just kidding. And my mom used to make all kinds of stuff out of that bologna. All kinds of stuff. And I remember this one. I could never get that recipe. I remember that one time she made bologna gravy on boiled potatoes. Oh man, that was good. How she did it, I still don't know. I tried it one time and I couldn't do it. So she must have, I know she added onions in there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not as thick, it was thinner. So you could put on your potato. It was kind of like soup.
Yeah.
And she would cook that and then she'd let it simmer on the side of that big old wood stove that we used to have.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember that because I loved that stuff, that bologna gravy, whatever she put in there. And then have bologna sandwich with your scone in it before you go to bed. But they tell you not to eat too much at night too.
Mhm.
But anyway, I'm going to have a drink of water and I'll let Renee take over.
Okay.
I'll be back in an hour. I'll be back in an hour.
Oh, those sounds bring so much joy. I just love the sound of the screen door. That was
Oh yeah,
it was heaven. Just to hear that, and you would get hollered at. And sometimes you just wanted to hit that door, and like you run in and run out, and grandma would always say, "Take it easy on that door." But it was just the sound of when it hit and then it closed. It was just like, oh, music. And the other thing was when you were talking about the rocking chair. Oh, I think every grandma had a rocking chair. And I got two of them. I got one for outside, and I have one in my bedroom. And I really, it is how our people became, as they say, calm back in that place of balance, is just rocking back and forth. And because of the work that we do, I'm finding out that rocking really helps with trauma. And it's amazing. Our people knew all this. Our grandparents would hold us and rock us in those rocking chairs. And I always had a rocking chair, and it was just like, it was just like heaven. Everything was being calmer, being filled with love. Those things, and when you were talking about biscuits and tea time, well, I think ours was ginger, those ginger snaps. Oh, yeah. I still love to have them. Oh, gosh. I just have to smell it, and then it brings back all the memories of that. And that's what makes us resilient. And when you were talking about our house being so cold that we had to even bundle up our food, we had to share our we had to share our blankets. And to have the wood stove going all the time, we had to take shifts but it was mostly for my brothers. My older brother, he had to take care of the woods during the night, and the coal stove, the black coal that would be put into the stove at home. But grandma had always a wood stove. And when you said about summertime being really hot, I thought my grandma was really rich. She had two houses. They call it a cookhouse. Grandma would cook outside. I mean, in that other little building, and do all the cooking there. And so we would bring our food into the house, and it was a lot cooler. And I always thought, wow, Grandma, you're a really rich woman. She just laughed at me. She says, no, this is just logic because you don't want the house to be too hot. And so going to the neighbors as trade, my grandma would always, they were sugar bags, flour bags, really big bags. And when they were, grandma would wash them up and she'd make things out of them. The other sound that I like to hear is that sewing machine, the treadle. And I would hear that, and I would just sitting there listening. That was one of the sounds. The rocking chair, the screen door, and my grandma had one of those old clocks, those ones that tick tock, tick tock. At first, when I went to my grandma's, it was annoying, but after a while, I loved it. And in those little alarm clocks, my grandma would be putting it beside her bed. She would wind it up to wake her. And so one time, my grandma was hard of hearing, and her she always had her clock beside her bed, and my bed was on the other side of her. And I have to go to bed early, and then she would bring up that clock, and I'd be laying there. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. So one night I went, well, she had turned her head. I snuck over and I grabbed that clock and I hid it under the pillows. And then it was a little while after she hollered, "Renee, bring that clock back." I said, "Grandma, how can you hear that?" She said, "Just bring that clock back." I think my grandma had selective hearing because she knew. Oh gosh, I would just kind of just chuckle, and grandma would always be just so witty, so smart, and it just make me laugh when I would be caught. And I go, "Oh, grandma, I'm not trying to make you mad," but she would just kind of put her face aside and she kind of be just laughing, and I know I'm okay. I'm okay. The other thing was in our community, we had both my grandparents lived along the river, one up at the upper end of the reserve and one at the lower end of the reserve. And so I grew up along the river, and I learned a lot. The river taught me a lot. And that's just like nature taught us a lot. And both my grandparents had barns. Oh, that was our playhouse. Going and gathering the straw and putting them up there. That's where we put our swings. We would be up in the barns, and a lot of adventures there in the barns of having a good time. And Grandpa would always put his big sleigh up in the loft during the winter. During the summer, and the one that you would for the winter time. And Grandpa and Grandma had gone away, and it seemed like all my cousins were there. It must have been some kind of family do. And Grandpa and Grandma and our parents went to town, and we were thinking, what can we do? It was during the winter time. Oh, let's go get Grandpa's sleigh. So here, all my cousins, we figured out a way to get that big sleigh out from the loft, and we hoisted up just like Grandpa would have us do, to take up the straw and to put it in the loft. So we hooked it up. The boys said, "Show us how to do it." And all us girls had to hold on to that, and we would bring that sleigh down. But by then, Grandpa's no longer had horses, and so because that's how he would take out the sleigh for us. So we took it, and my grandparents lived on a hill going down towards the river. But we knew we were told not to go that way, to go right down to the river. We had to go this way on the other side of us. And so we got in that sleigh. There must have been about 10 of us, all of us. And we pulled back the part where that would be hooked to the horses. We pulled it back, and we all jumped on that sleigh, and we go down the hill. Wow, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but we all had to be like the horses and pull it all back up. So we were always on an adventure at Grandma and Grandpa's. It was just like, what can we do? And they always told us, you can't go near the river. You got to stay away from the river. But kids, well, there was always that time when you kind of, we'll go to the creek. The creek leads right into the river. And so we would be back there, and our parents would say, "I don't want you swimming in the river either." And so we said, okay. So we would find ourselves hot, and we didn't have swimming pools back then, but we had the creeks, and there was bloodsuckers there too. And so we would go and we saw these muskrats, and they were having a ball, or we were watching them. We snuck up on them because we knew that's where they were. And so we snuck up on them, and we saw them playing. And so we got the idea, let's do what they're doing. So we chased them away. We made noise and they all went away. So we climbed up on the hill just like them. And we would, they already had it all wet. So there was our slide. And we would go into the water and we'd be doing that. And then we say, oh, we got to get back. So we take off some of our clothes and rinse it in the water and wash it. And then we go back up to the house. First thing our grandparents would say, we know where you were. Oh, what do you mean? And then he says, because our hair was just stiff with mud because we forgot to wash our hair out. And we looked gray because we were playing right in the clay. And those memories are what makes us resilient. And there's a time when in our where my grandma lived on the other end, we had a baker. This come out of Caledonia, this wagon, Weston, I think it. His name was Alec the baker, and he'd visit. He'd come. It took forever to get a loaf of bread because he would come. He would stop at everybody's house, but he was the messenger. He would come to each other's house and he would spend time, and then he'd go to the next house and he'd deliver the bread or whatever you needed. And then he would share, but he always had treats for us. He always had treats for us. And that's where those ginger snaps came, because he was always good to us kids, even though we only saw him once a month, once a week, every 2 weeks or whatever, because he would travel the lower part of the reserve and he would make his rounds to delivering the food. As we grew up, we really were blessed to have such a kind, gentle man that came into our community and treated us really good. It was so nice to have him and be a part of our community. And then I remember how we would have to go to my grandma never drove. And so wherever she went, she always walked. And that's what inspired me, was my grandma. If my grandma could do all this, I can do that. My grandma had a beautiful garden, and by then my grandpa had passed on. So my grandma, she never got welfare. She always was working. And what she was always grateful. She always had songs in her heart. And after supper, she would always be singing. And it made me feel so good to hear her sing. And to have her, like you were saying, talking to the plants. And she'd be out there singing. I know it was singing for them, singing to the plants after we finished supper, and we would sit outside and she would be singing. And then we would go and check. Do you remember getting those the potato bugs off the plants? We used to have to, from the wood stove, we have to take the ashes, and I would have to go and sprinkle all the potatoes. Those were things that it was just, they seemed to have everything. And whatever came up, they could handle any situation that came up. And so, and even the evenings, when we'd sit out on the porch there and we watched the sun come down, oh, it was so beautiful. And because we lived near the river, we would always have these birds singing. Another sound I like to hear is those red-winged blackbirds. They have such a beautiful song. Then the other thing that we used to do was fireflies. Go and collect fireflies. Those were the things that really made an adventure. We would be running out there, and we have our jar, and we catch those fireflies. So these are some of the memories that we would have with our grandparents. The other thing is that how kind and gentle everybody was in the neighborhood. And what happened was, whenever we had to get anything from the store, we walked. My grandma, we walked. Of course, I'm younger, so I was she would say, we would stop on all the neighbors, all her friends before we went to that corner store. It was a whole concession. We would start out in the morning after all our work was done, and we would walk. And she would stop. She's, oh, let's see what they need. And so we had a basket, and then she said she would have her little list. Then we'd go on, oh, let's stop here. We got to see if they need anything. So that's how it went. And then we get to the store, and then we have to walk back. And I would be carrying the things, and we dropped them off. And time we got home it was supper time we got home, because we had stopped. And people were very generous. We did something for them. They said, oh, they give us some drink or some fruit for our journey walking. And so one time my grandma was going to make something for me. And she says, well, do you want it today or do you want it tomorrow? I said, well, I'm kind of hankering it for today, Grandma. She says, well, you can go across the river to the store. And I went, whoa. There was a community rowboat just with on the end of her property, because there was a fence line, and everybody was able to use that boat to go across the river to the store. And so I said, my grandma, I think I was about 7. My grandma, she knew that I could do it. She says, well, you go to the store. Here, you know how to get in that boat, because my grandma showed me how to do that, because we would go across the river on the boat. But one day she said, you can do it. And I went, oh my gosh. Okay, I said. So I got in that boat. I unhooked the boat, and I shoved it off, and I got out and jumped in the boat, and I'm off. And I closed my eyes, and I'm roaring the boat. And I said, I should be there. I opened my eyes. I was just going around in circles because I didn't. It was really my first time by myself, and I thought I could. But then I remembered what my grandma had taught me, how to make it go straight, how to turn it, and how to slow it down, and all those things. But it was the initial adventure, just getting in that boat and that little rowboat, and go across the river. The river seemed so wide, but today when I'm there, I said I just smile because I thought it was so wide. Then I run up to the other side of the bank, and then I run over up to the fields and go into the little store. And then I would get what we needed, and then I come back. And I think my grandma was watching from the window to make sure I was okay. But she made it like, oh, you can do that now. But those are the things that they taught us. They taught us how to be resilient. They taught us that we can, and they showed us that they had faith in us. And one of the things is that they took away the fear. They took away the fear by their encouragement. They said, you can do it. And that's what I like to hear, is that you can do it. And that's what the grandparents was always reminding us, always telling us that, whenever you're having a hard time, don't ever give up. Don't ever give up, she would say. Because, it's going to get a little easier, but, every time you're going to handle it a lot better. And so hearing those words when I was growing up, now I become that grandma. I become those words, what you say. And the other day we were in a garden, and my great-grandchildren were helping me, and we were preparing the soil, the manure, and the straws, getting the straw and spreading it. And my great-grandchildren were I said, oh, we got to rake it. And they said, why? I said, because Grandma came to visit me, and she told me I did something wrong, and I have to go back and I have to fix it. And so we had to rake all the straw up and thing. And so then they were looking at me, and they said, Grandma came to you? I said, yeah, she came to me in my dream. And I said, that's what I'm going to do too, to you guys too. I'm going to help you to remember this is how it's to be done. So those are simple things that, sometimes we forget. We want to make sure we do things right. But, they just like Grandfather Neil said, you know, we need to speak to them when they speak to us. And our grandparents are not far away, our aunties and our uncles. They still visit us in our dreams, and they still remind us on how to do things right. And, you know, all they had to do was go. And that's what I remember seeing in my dreams too, is my grandma would just go like this. And it would remind me, what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? Because just like any person, we all was we're always adventurous and trying things. And so those are some of the things that I'm bringing up from my heart and sharing it with you, because this is the real world. And we were always told that we were to be ready. And that's why they had pantries. Do you remember storing on your milk and your butter in a well?
Kind of, yeah. They used to have ice boxes. Ice boxes.
Yeah. We would have the iceman come to work and deliver the block of ice, and he'd come in one door, and we would sneak out the other door. We have our little bowl, and we would be chipping on the ice so that that was our treat. So those were times when we were very happy. We didn't have a lot, but what we were happy.
Yeah, I agree. You know, when you talk about the ice and memory of that, but when I said ice box, I remember that was before we had. I think our hydro came in 1956, I believe, on the island. I think around that time, that's when our hydro finally came to the island. But before that, we had these. They're like, I don't know, probably about maybe 4 feet high. No, bigger than that. Maybe 5 feet high. And what they used to do in the wintertime, and we used to go watch them actually. We used to go watch them. And what they would do, they had about, I don't know how many teams of horses they had here. Probably quite a few. And nearly all the guys, because they did logging here on the island, they needed those horses. And anyway, what they did then is that our neighbor, he had an old pig farm. Oh, that pig farm. You still remember that pig farm? Oh, jeez. He couldn't go visit them because that they had a big a big pig. huge boar. Oh, man. You couldn't even go to the fence. He'd come right after you. He'd run back. And I'd run in the house. Mom, what? That pig is chasing me. Oh, she'd say. And so one day our neighbor there got too old to do the pigs. And I remember them doing they decided that they were going to kill one for the food. They were going to kill one for the food. And I decided to go and have a look. I asked my mom or my dad if I could go and watch. How? Then he'd say, "Don't get anybody's way." That's what he said. You'll give stop Kagan, he'd say, don't get anybody's way. So we went over there, and he got a hold of that one day. What are you going to do? And I watched it. It was for me at that age and not knowing what they want to do. It was a little on the horror side. The pig was squealing. All of a sudden, it fell down. So there was a pine tree between my mom and dad's house and their house, and there was a big branch on there like this size, and it was on my dad's side, on his property, but it didn't matter where the tree was as long as there was a tree close by. So about 3 or 4 men got it over there, and they started pulling it up, and they did what they had to do, and like bleed it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching this, and it was very interesting to me. I know the first time I ever saw anything like that. It would sit there. I don't know, till it all was done, and they take it down, and then all of a sudden, they'd all be the men that would be there helping cutting that pig up. That we call them gokos. pig, and it was amazing how much food that pig had. Even though we ate everything, right? As long as we had it, we ate it, pork, beef, whatever, because it was like one of the foods that we had because we couldn't because of all the hunting rights were kind of taken away from us back then. And anyway, we after that, he did, the old man, their next door neighbor, he decided he didn't want to raise anymore. So what they did was clean that all out, that pig, that whatever they call it. What do you call those anyway?
Pig pen,
Pig barn. Pig barn.
Yeah.
Oh, let's call it a pig barn. Let's call it a pig barn. It was good size. It was a good size one. And they cleaned it out really nice and really got it all cleaned out and everything. So they did. And then one day my dad, they got his horses. He had horses, my dad. He had horses. How? Minnie, he'd say to my mom, how you kumi kemen. That means we're going to go get ice. And I wondered, what the heck are they doing? So I asked if I could go, and where are they going? And then they went down below my aunt's house. She lived just a little ways down, and they went down that way. And you could see the horses, teams of horses coming. There's had to be about 5, maybe 6 teams of horses going down to the bay. They went way out. I don't know how far out they went, maybe about a quarter mile or a half a mile out. And so we were just kind of sitting along the shoreline. We could see them. Well, of course, back then, your eyesight was perfect, right? You could see a fly 400 miles away on a stormy night. That's how good our eyesight was. And look at me now. I got these glasses.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to my story. And so they said that one of the men said, "How was it?" She told us to get on the sleigh. So we got on the sleigh and they went out there. And they told us where to sit. They told us where to, just to watch what they were doing. And they'd already had cut through. They poked a hole through. I think it was 4 feet of ice. And then I watched them. I don't know what that was they used, but they started getting that saw. And all of a sudden, the saw got through. They put a hole through with the saw, and they started cutting. They were bringing out blocks, probably bigger than. Well, you can't see my. I'm spreading my. I'm watching. How can you see where my hands are? Oh my God! Oh, I'm trying to show you how big the ice block was, and like you can't see where my arms are. Oh my goodness. That's what happens when you get old. Anyway. Oh my goodness. Anyway, get back to the ice. Anyway, there's I would say about 3 feet. 3 by 3, I think. I think that's what they were saying. 3 by 3. And they would pull them out with these hooks. 2 or 3 men would be pulling these hooks out of the ice with the hooks. And then the sleigh would come beside the hole by the ice. And then they would load those ice blocks onto the sleigh. And then once they had, I think just the 1 row of ice they had on the sleighs. And then they'd go. And that's, where I said about that pig barn. Yeah. That's where they took that ice, is in there. Because they had a sawmill here on the island when I was growing up. And this is where they got the sawdust. So what they did was they sprinkled that, where they had that pig barn, they sprinkled all the sawdust on the floor. Mm-hmm. Then as they brought the ice blocks in, they piled it. And what they would do is throw ice, those wood chips on top of the ice to insulate it, to keep it cold. And I wondered why. That's kind of dirty putting wood chips on there, but they knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. They knew what they were doing. And then they'd bring some more, and then they keep doing it all day till they had that all filled up. All filled up. And then my dad would, bring one of the ice blocks on me. They'd cut it there. in half so it would fit in that ice box. And that's how they used to keep our stuff cold. We didn't have a well to speak of at home, but how they took care of those things. I can't remember because I was too busy playing, right? But when the hydro came, things really changed. Then all those things that I watched growing up we're now beginning to, like I said, remember when I said a new page has been turned in our book of life, and some of those beautiful things that they used to do, the men and the women, to make sure that we were going to be fine. Us guys were going to grow up to be people that were going to understand what it is they were doing, how to look after their families. And, kind of, like I said, I wish I could go back there, live another year, one more time back there, and then watch that all over again. Watch the beauty of what they did. And you'd see people one time, you see people going to my neighbor's house with these burlap bags. They put their ice block in there and they'd walk home with it. Then they just scrape sawdust or the wood chips from the sawmill off, and they put it in the ice box. And everybody had one. And it worked. It really worked well. And, but then, of course, like I said, the hydro came. That changed a lot of stuff. That really changed everything. The way we live, the way we think, the way we did things. And because back in the day, when we didn't have hydro, like I said, we had eyesight that was so perfect. That you could, like I said, you could see a mosquito 400 miles away in a stormy night. That's how good our eyesight was. And there was never nothing wrong with us. We were healthy as horses, probably healthier than a horse, because of the things that we ate, right?
Right.
Like I said, I remember telling you one last time we talked was that when we used to walk around the island and we'd eat the foods off the ground.
Yeah.
Off the trees, and if you got thirsty, we used to use what my cousin used to do is take a leaf from a beech tree and chew on that, and it started producing the saliva, so your mouth wouldn't dry out. That's how so we did all that kind of stuff. Today you can't even do that anymore because a lot of that stuff that used to grow is not growing anymore. And because of the way things are. Remember when I said we used to have about up to 4 feet of ice?
Yes.
And that was our ride, or sometimes even thicker. In some places, it was up to 5 feet. They used to say, even thicker than that out in the deeper water. And that was our ride across the Cedar to the mainland too. When the men took their horses across, everybody would get a ride over. That was, about 2 miles. We'd have to do that, and some people would walk like this. I remember when I was a kid, my dad said, "Ronya, what's your stone? Go make some money." He'd say, "Take the sleigh, he'd say, "Take that sleigh." So I went over. You know how much I got paid to bring people's groceries over 2 miles right to their house? I got $1. $1 was a lot of money back then. It was a lot of money. Sometimes we were lucky to get $2. And then I'd go back across again because we were kids, we were young. We knew we had a lot of energy. We'd go back, and a couple of us would go back and get another load, come home, make another $1 or $2. And then my dad would say, "How me? Oh, that's enough. You go." He'd tell me to stop because he didn't want me to get over right? And I showed him my money, and my mom would take it. She said, "I look after this for you." "Well, give me at least 50 cents, Mom," I said. Because we used to have little stores. People used to have a little store in their house, and one of them was a neighbor that had the pigs and raised pigs and had that ice house. And we used to go there and buy stuff,
Mhm.
come home and munch away, but they wouldn't let me eat that stuff at supper time. So, but when I think about all that stuff we used to do when we were kids, we had trails all over the island. We had trails all over the island. I remember that one day. This is one time at Indian Day School. Oh man, that's a different story altogether. That stuff. But anyway, there was just one story out of there that I forget what happened. We were talking in the schoolyard, our language. That was back in the day. That was probably maybe grade 4 or grade 5, somewhere around there. And we were talking our language. We were having fun. We were playing soccer, and we were talking our language, All of a sudden, there was one teacher come out of this, started screaming at us, grabbed one of the guys by the back of the neck, and they walked us into the school. And my friend, all right, boys, we told you not to speak your language. Not in the class, not in the schoolyard, they said. And so there's 4 of us standing there, and then she said, "Put your hands out." So we did. That first strap that my friend got, who was standing to my left, he was probably the next guy over. He grabbed the belt from her hand and threw it on the ground. And my friend said, "Let's go, boys." Okay. Okay, he was a gang leader. And we took off. We took off. And because we didn't think there was anything wrong with speaking your language. It doesn't matter where you were. And we took off into the bush. And we went behind the old community hall, I believe, along that trail and down by somebody's house and followed this one trail. Because we had all kinds of trails, like I said. We followed these trails. We'd go play and disappear into the bush. The next day, when we got home, I guess the teacher went to each house and went and told our parents what they said we did. And so we come out of the bush, went home, that clock in your head when it tells you to go home for supper, well, that rang. So we went home. I got home anyway, and I got yelled at by my mom. And I told her, "Mom," I said, "we didn't do nothing. All we did was play in the schoolyard and stuff. We were just talking." They said that, what did they say? That we broke something. We didn't break anything, Mom. I said, ask those other guys. I'll go get them. And then she didn't say any more after that. But on the next week, so we went back to school the next day, and we we went back around to the office. But this time, they had that one teacher there with her, so we wouldn't run. But we got strapped anyway. And when I think about that stuff, it reminds me of how cruel it was. And yet we continued, like Grandma Renee says, we're so resilient. That should be our names, the resilient people of North America.
Mm-hmm.
My name would be King of the Resiliency. No. But exactly. But because we knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We knew what to do because we saw our grandparents, our mums and dads, our aunties and uncles, our cousins and everything do what it is that we needed to survive.
Yeah.
And we survived. It's like that story that we have in our teachings, one of the teachings, that when original man was walking the earth, he noticed that there were two people all the time, two beings always together. And he talked to Creator. He says, how come I'm not walking with anyone?
Mm-hmm.
And the Creator said to him, he says, well, then I will send you someone you can walk with. And he sent him the wolf. And the original man thanked him. But he says, when you part your ways, whatever happens to one will happen to the other.
Mhm.
And that's true. It happened. Wolf was nearly wiped out. And same thing with us. But you know what? We came back
Mhm.
because we knew what to do. They knew, our grandparents, our aunties, our uncles, all the people, right down to the Haudenosaunee land, all the way up to the way high north. Everybody knew what to do. They knew how to survive. And and that's why I say to myself sometimes, I wish I could go back there for one more year and live one of those years that I was with my grandparents, really, maybe, or learning, watching those men working out on the ice, watching men cutting trees down and see how they're doing that. That's how I learned to do what I do.
Mhm.
I learned about taking care of your family. I learned from my mom. I learned from my grandparents. I learned from my aunties and uncles how to take care of a family. Because when I quit drinking, all I did was buy food. That sometimes I'd buy food that would last us 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, because I learned from my mom what my mom and dad did, how to buy, what to buy, when to buy it.
Yeah.
And the only thing I don't know how to make though is scone. I'm trying to find somebody to show me the way there. No. I tried it one time. I tried making baked bread, fried scone one time, fried bread.
Mhm.
I know I'm rolling it up and then pounding it down, and I grabbed it, threw it against the wall, peeled it off, and put it in the pan. It didn't work. But again, like I said, back in those days, Grandma Renee said about the screen doors. Oh, I remember those screen doors slamming too. You could hear the creaking, and then all of a sudden you let it go, slam. Hey, what are you doing out there? Don't slam that door. It costs money to make that. Well, it didn't. Actually, it did cost money because they made their own screen doors.
Yeah.
But I love the sound of that screen door too.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too. I should remind you that they used to leave those the inside doors open in the summertime,
Yeah.
and then all they had was a screen door, and all the windows were open to get the air through it, because nobody had to worry about anybody then. It was safe time. It was a safe time to live, and I learned that. But nowadays I got to lock up. Sometimes I leave one eye open when I sleep. Sometimes I leave one of my ears open when I sleep. Because sometimes when I learn things like that, and when I hear noise, I open my eyes. Especially when I got my grandchildren here and my daughter. Because that's one of the things that we're taught as men, that we got to look after our families. And when I used to see that, and how the men, when they would walk with the women, they never walked behind. Women never walked behind. When I used to watch them do that, they would always walk side by side. When you see people walking, when I was younger, when I used to see my aunties and uncles and other family members like on the island walking, you see them walking, they'd meet. Oops, let me bring my other hand. How does this work? Oh, there it is. When they meet like this, they'd stop
Mhm.
and they'd stand there and talk for nobody knows, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Then you see them, then they walk by each other and then, okay, later on. Then they go by. And then sometimes when we're kids, when we're playing on the road and you see them coming and hey, they go doggy web. Hey, you better go home now, they'd say, because it was getting dark. Because every community member back then could tell you what to do,
Yes.
and you had to listen.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you'd get it at home.
Mhm.
And and I learned that. I learned that how that worked, and how beautiful that was when that happened. When other people took care of you. It's kind of like when I got into trouble one time. I think I told this part too once. I got into trouble one time on one part of the island, and we broke something by accident. And by the time I got home, they already knew.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out how could I go from here to my house and have that guy know. No, there's no way of knowing. But they had a way of doing it. But they knew. I had to go. Well, what did we have to do for that? I think we had to work it off. I think I'm pretty sure, but we had to go back and work it off. That's one of the things. You break somebody's house, something from their house, you got to go back and help fix that, one way or the other. And that's some of the things that that's some of the things I miss sometimes. Or if like sometimes I remember a friend of mine. When we were going, he stole something from the garden, from somebody's garden, but he was hungry. He said. So what he had to do in repayment to I can't remember what he took. I think he took some beans. I think that's what he ate, right? You know how you can just eat beans, right? Like green beans, yellow beans. You can just eat those without even having to cook those. Or good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he had to go back and help hoe the garden as payment for taking those. And then the guy says to him, "Next time you're hungry, let me know. I'll let you take some." And that's how that works. That's how that used to work. And but today is a little bit different. It's hard for me to find somebody to come and help me do what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really lift too much things now. But like I said, I'd like to go back one of those years and live 1 year again back there. And because I learned a lot of stuff, but especially looking after your family, the food especially, making sure that you had enough food for the kids, and letting them know that if we have ice cream, we'll get ice cream if we can afford it. And that's what we used to do. My wife and I used to buy our juices, um, those fruit cups or whatever you call the pudding cups or whatever you call them. We used to buy those. I used to like eating those too. But we made sure that they didn't eat them all because you needed to last them for a while. Anyway, Grandma Renee,
Yes.
you're up.
Cake. Well, when you were mentioning about food being prepared, and that's what you saw. Grandma would always say, "We need to be prepared. You never know what's going to happen." And I'm so grateful because I always had to make sure, even though we had lean times, my parents would always seem to have, we would have extra food. Well, Grandma would always have that extra because she had that garden, and Grandma had in her basement she would have canned goods. Oh, it was just amazing. And I think that's where, because of her, that I've always been prepared. That's what I was always. My aunties, my grandmas, my grandpas would always say, "You have to be prepared." And that's what we need to remind our children is always be prepared. Never take things for granted because it can change so quickly, just like nature shows us. And how about Monday? Did you have phone service?
Where? Not till later on, way later.
No, just recently on Monday there was a lot of
The
problems with the
Rogers?
phone.
Oh, Rogers. No, we have Bell.
Oh, well, I have Fido, and there was a lot of problems this last week on Monday. I had to cancel whatever I was doing for Monday because of the phone. We weren't able. It had no service, and
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, it had no service, and this happened just like that. And that's what I thought. Be prepared. Be prepared. And so it's almost like knowing that we had to prepare ourselves, prepare our bodies. And I'm so grateful that we had what they call today as chores. But my grandma would always call it doing. We will be doing this, we'll be doing that. And so it was to make us, as they say, our bodies stronger. A good example, I always look back at my grandma. Wow, she walked halfway across the reserve just to go home one time. And how many of them can do that today? How many grandmas can do that? How many young people can do that today? You don't see them out walking like they used to. And when I went to South America 2 years ago, I saw a lot of the grandmas. I saw the grandpas. Everybody was walking. And when we went from one small town to another, it was just like all the people got on the bus. There was like families, and they would have their blanket, and they have their bundles and whatever their groceries was. It was just like old times, and it was so nice to see that. And when you were talking about how men and women walking together like that, I saw a grandson holding his grandma's arm and walking down the road. And now I remember that's how it used to be around here.
Mhm.
Everybody was just that togetherness. It was nobody in a rush. Everybody was walking very just casually, just talking about it. I had to laugh when you were talking about that about gathering the ice. Well, our neighbor had a bigger barn and farm, and we helped them, and they helped us out because they had a lot of crop, and we would be there to help them to harvest it. And they always loaned us the big wagon whenever we need it, because we would have to we would put on our barrels. We used to have big barrels to contain our waters for washing. And so we would go to the river, and all the neighbors did. It was just like a car wash. That's what I could call it. Like a car wash. Everybody good. There was always that little drop, and it was to the river. And people would be almost in line, and they would fill up their wagons, and they would come back up the hill, and then they would go on. Then another one would come, and they would gather water. And it was so fun. The time we got home, we were all wet because the barrels would be go splashing, and we'd be all wet. But those were times that everybody had to go and get water. Everybody had to, as they say, help one another. And this was the most beautiful thing. Is even when I built my house, I had what they call, I had it made because my mom had so many girls. All my brother-in-laws, they came and they put up my house, and just like that, it was, everybody used to help each other build a house. Today, you can't get that. And everybody would come and help out, and I always remember, if somebody comes and does something good for you, you go out and you give them a treat. You give them something to thank them for the work that they've done to help you out. And I was so fortunate. I finally found somebody to come and finish my grove, cut up the trees that there was a mess. And I was so glad it was people. It was a young man and his uncle and his father. They come and they did the good work that we used to always do. And I was so happy they did that. I went and I had strawberries, and I made a big bowl of strawberries for them. And they really liked it. I said, break time. Went out and I gave them ice cream. Strawberries at that time. And and when I was coming back, he says, "Oh, what's for supper?" I said, "Well, I'll see what I got. Don't worry." And I says, "The next day you're going to have another treat." And that's what I like to do. And that's how I was taught. When somebody comes and help you out, you take care of them. You always feed them. And you sit with them and you have that good conversation and you thank them. And these are things that we never took for granted. Friendship. Whenever you see somebody and you would always help them out. You're always, no matter what road you were on, and if you see somebody struggling in the field, you stop and you would go over and you help them. That was the norm of while we were growing up. So these journeys that we're taking today, we are, I think we're going to come back to these things because we're learning how it is, and more of sharing of how it used to be. And one of the things is people are learning is they're learning to appreciate what they've been given. And you hear more of that, realizing that they had taken a lot of things for granted. And so this is what I always remember is how my grandma said that everything happens for a reason. All of us was taught that. The grandparents would always remind us it happened for a reason. And I always look at it. What was that lesson? And so maybe it was to make me take an inventory of myself. And so all these things, this is how our grandparents would sit us down when we got to be teenagers, and we would be out, and my grandpa would say, Saja, and he'd sit there and he never went this way. He'd sit there and he talked to us, and he shared how our mothers would feel and how our fathers would feel. He says, your father was young too. This is why he understands what you're going through right now. And you may not understand why he tells you no. And that was so beautiful how my grandpa explained. He explained why my father said no, why my father didn't want me to be out there, because he knew what could happen. And so, when later on in life, it was hard to be a parent and to mean no, because you want to give your child everything. But I always had to remember to be strong. That's what my grandpa has said. He says, being a parent is going to be really tough. And your father and mother are having a real tough time because you're their first one. This is your training. And what you're going to, how you are going to relate is going to help each other. And so I said, oh. So when it came time for me to be a parent, and I realized how hard it was for my mom and my dad to say no and mean no, and also to discipline me. It brought a great awareness because it was through my friend. One of my friends said, I wish I had somebody that had loved me and cared for me like you have, somebody that is concerned that you are going home tonight. And that was really an eye-opener for me to hear the other way of understanding, no, you can't do that. No, you can't be there. And so it was my grandparents that taught me about how to be a parent. And it's going to be a tough job, they say, but you're going to get through it. You're going to cry, and that's okay. But you're going to get through it. No matter what happens, you're going to get through it. And sure enough, you can. And when later on in life, when I became a parent, I understood what my dad and my mom went, how we were grounded. We had to always show respect and honor. But the respect, that's what my grandma would say. Respect is that key for everything. And she says, this is one of our greatest gifts. You may not have everything like the richest man, but you're going to have much more than the rich man because you're respecting all things. And she says, you don't have to worry if you don't have money, if you don't have all those materialistic things. The most important thing to have is respect. She says that's going to open many doors. People are going to admire you, and they're going to your name, as they say, your name will, as they say, will be carried on. Remember when that girl came and how she treated us? And that's what we always say, remember when. Remember when you were little and how you honored and respect. That carries that your family's name. How many of you heard that? You carry your family's name. And it's up to you how that name is to be remembered. And so you hear of different families in their communities, what they are known for. And it's that gift that every one of us has to give to our community, the gift of sharing. And so when it came time, when my father was, he had gotten sick, and it was time for him to get ready to go back home. And I spoke to him. I said, he asked me for help. And I said, I'll help you. I'll help you because you helped me when I was little. You helped me to be strong. Now it's my turn to help you. And so I said, Dad, I am here to bathe you, to take care of you, because that's what you did for me. You took care of me. And so now it's my duty to do that for you in honor and respect for you. And so that's why we never had to have insurance. We never had old age homes, because we always took care of our parents. We always seemed to, how they say, you take care so that someone will take care of you. And so when it came time for him to go on, he had helped me when I was growing up. He guided me in things that to do. So I had to guide him for his journey home. And that is to help him to get ready to cross over. And so I told him, Dad, I said, we're going to have a healing circle, because he had cancer. And so what I said to him, because he had asked me for help. And so I said, Dad, so I got the family together. I said, what we need to do is acknowledge in this time that we're given, we're to tell them how much it meant to them. And I said, so this healing circuit, I'm going to start it. And I apologize to my dad for giving him such a hard time when I was growing up, when I didn't understand life. I asked forgiveness, because I now know that what it was to love and to make sure that I was going to stand upright and to be a good person. And so I thank you, Dad, for giving me for giving me guidelines, for making me get up, making me do these things. I said, I'm very grateful. So these things are a gift. Those are gifts that we have been given to help us to be resilient. And so we are here, as they say, to support each other. And this is why we were so blessed that we have this opportunity to come into your homes and to share and to support you, and to know at this time what they call going without. We all used to fast, and we do need to fast in order to appreciate a lot of things. Learn how to appreciate your eyesight, learn how to appreciate all these things. Learn how to be patient. That is one of the greatest challenges every child, every human being has to learn. Every creature has to learn is to be patient. And another is acceptance. This is why the indigenous people are here today, because they have accepted a lot of things. This is what made them resilient. This is what gave them the strength. And this is what's flowing in your bloodline, your blood memory. You have that gift of resilience. You have the gift to overcome these times. Know that you're not alone in what is happening. Know that we have been doing ceremonies to celebrate your life here and to honor you, for you are our future. And this is why we're here today. Because what we are to do as grandparents is to brush this off, just like our grandparents did that to us and supported us. This is why We are so blessed to come into your homes and to share this time with you, to show you you can get through all these things that may have been troubling your mind. We have each other. We have a way of communicating, and we have created a greater relationship, and that is with ourselves, knowing that there are others that are out there that are going through the same thing. And so we come here to share the love that's in us. And I heard that today. I heard from one of the young person that love is in the air. And that's so great to hear. When everybody was talking about, grumbling and complaining because it was snow, I heard this young person say, love is in the air. And I was so grateful that they have remembered to look at the beauty of everything that has happened to bring back the change, to renew their spirit. And so with that, I want to hear some good songs to help us to take us into the next season, getting ready for the crops that are growing. So you are our seeds, and we are taking care of you. We are nurturing you so that you can grow strong. So with that, we're going to have some songs.
Who's singing?
Ooh,
I can't. I don't sing anymore. I went religious.
you should say more then.
Me. Do. Re.
Me.
You know, I wish I had been taught my culture when I was younger. You know, but when I guess for reasons unknown, there was a reason why I was given a second chance for survival, to live, I guess, because I drank again. Like I said, I'm an alcoholic, and I believe I told a story once already that I drank 24 years of my life away, and I really didn't know anything about my teenage years. Really, when I sobered up, we'd had fun. We did just go out and do our stuff. But when we were kids, younger than I guess younger than 11, we used to have a lot of fun. Like Grandma Renee says, you know, when we do all these things, there's reasons why we got this far in life, and the reason was that Creator gave us this path, and on that path there are many obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we face those obstacles, that's when we turn to our families, because it's the family bond that keeps everything alive. You see, I'm kind of related to Renee, Grandma Renee. I'm probably about 250th cousin, 150 times removed,
Yeah, we will.
because we were related through Creator.
Mm-hmm.
We're related through Creator. And you know, the beautiful thing about life is that the life that it's not our life; it's Creator's life. When He gets ready to call us back, they say that our elders, when it's time for the elders to leave, they say that the elders already know when their time is, because they start preparing things. They do things that are a little bit off from what they normally would be doing. I witnessed that once when my dad passed away in 1974. Anyway, that one week he cleaned the house, cleaned everything. My mom used to work in Oakville, and she used to come home on weekends. And he cleaned everything. He'd make sure, he'd tell me not to make a mess. If I make a mess, clean it up. And there's this one little room that he cleaned really good. So he cleaned that. And then he decided to go across on the ice. And there was a soft spot in the ice. He fell through. But there was one of the men from the island here who was at Cedar Point who heard his calls. And he went out and got him, saved him. Well, not saved him, but, well, yeah, I'll say he kind of saved him. They brought the boat in and he put him on the boat. And they say that what happened next was the man that got him out of the water just left him for a few minutes, for just a few minutes. When he came back into the boat, the passenger compartment area, my dad had passed away. Hypothermia. Just for a moment, he said. I wasn't gone that long. And when he passed, he like I said, he cleaned that whole house just before he passed away. When we brought him home, my mom put him in that bedroom where they cleaned really good. That's where he laid it. That's where we put the casket. That's where he was for that time. And life is, again, like I said, life is so, when Creator comes to take you, everything changes in that person who's getting ready, when the Creator comes and gets you. You may not notice it. But when you see it actually happen, I think about that sometimes, because when our elders are ready to go, they do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they go real quick; they don't even know. Sometimes it takes them a while. You know, the thing I like about life is that life is so abundant.
Mm-hmm.
It's so abundant. You look outside, everything there is about life. Everything there is about life. The animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, humankind, even those inanimate objects we believe that don't have life, have life.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the things the my teachers and the medicine people and the elders have talked about. No matter what it looks like, it's still life. It's part of it. When we talk about the remember whens, when I say I would like to go back there and live one more year of that life. You know, when Grandma Renee talked about the family life, the importance of family. Because, you know, a lot of the times, you know, there are people who've lost their whole family. And then we have to think about that, right? But still, they ask us to move on. When our time comes, it'll come. I told everybody mine is going to be when I turn 80, 81. 3 months, 2 days, 24 hours, and 33 seconds after 81. Then they say that I'm crazy when I talk like that. I said, no, I'm not. I'm just having fun. Remember, I said, that's what life is all about, is having fun. Because if you can't have fun, then, you know, I don't know what to say. But when I feel a little alone, and then or I'm under well, when I think about things and it makes me sad, I try and sing, or I smudge. I think of our Creator and the beautiful things that He put upon Mother Earth, that garden that He put here for us to use. So we have to give them thanks. Our Creator, our grandfather, our grandmother, and Mother Earth, because they were the first four that came into this universe what Creator put here. So when we think about it, we have to talk about it. Oh, hey, hi, oh. Hey, hi, 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 oh. Ishamadero. An open And that song talks about our Creator. And we always have to remind ourselves to give thanks to our Creator. And in that time when Creator moved across the universe and it was dark, it is said that he created that place where Grandfather was to sit. That heat that we receive from the universe to keep things alive, to keep us going. And then that's where that Grandfather was placed after he had done his work upon the earth. He was the first one of the first ones to arrive. And he was placed in that spot in the sun. His spirit was placed there to walk every day of our lives across the daytime sky. Mm-hmm. Grandmother, same thing. She was placed into that beautiful color of the moon. All the regalia she had, she was placed there, her spirit. When we see her rise in the east, you can see her peeking through to see if everybody's watching her. And then when she comes above the top, oh, she's in a beautiful color, sometimes blue, sometimes bluish green, sometimes other colors. And then when Mother Earth, when Mother was placed, her spirit was placed into the earth itself. She was given all those tasks to bring life to the earth. Everything that you see out there, it was between Mother and Creator that put all those things there for us to use in that good way. All the plants, the water plants, all the plants that are under the ground, the trees, the being tallest of all the plants, to give us those medicines that we need, to give us the air to breathe. And then they placed the animals upon the earth. And when those animals, they when they gathered around, how beautiful it looked. But when man set foot upon the earth, or man or woman set foot upon the earth, they looked around when the Creator blew life into that vessel, this vessel that I walk in, the vessel that Grandma Renee walks in. when grand creator blew life into that vessel. It is said they looked around and saw the beauty of what was put there for them. And the journey of man began. So that song is just letting you know about. Hold on for a second, please. It's the Prime Minister calling.
Not giving up.
There. I hated to do that. Anyways, so that song, that's what that song is saying. We're a creator, our grandfather, our grandmother, and Mother Earth. Kajamine do, Mishomis, Nokmis, and Shkukmikwe. That's actually one of the newer songs. This one I just sang for you. Just to remind us about how we got here, who got here first, or who played second, what was on third. Anyway, so a lot of memories come back. Like I say, when I was thinking about what Grandmother Renee was saying, and a lot of the songs that were sung in the houses.
Mm-hmm.
People used to sing actually in houses. They used to go from house to house and sing.
Yeah.
I remember those. And there are people that had pianos. Oh, them guys would play almost all night.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They weren't singing any rock and roll boogie woogie stuff. They were actually singing hymns.
Mm-hmm.
They were singing hymns. And you know what? I'm glad because I used to hear them. My grandmother, my dad's mom lived right beside us. And they had a piano, and you could hear them in there singing away hymns. Then you'd hear them laughing away. Then you'd hear them singing again. Then they'd laugh again. And yet, like I said, we're very resilient people. We know what to do and how to survive. At least some of us do. I wish sometimes some younger people would really sit down and say, how did you do this? How did you do that? How can we do that?
Mm-hmm.
We when we try to teach young people today the different things that we have, let's say you have 10 kids, young people wanting to learn. Only one decides he wants to follow what you're saying. That's one. And that's a good start. Because when I look at the other day, actually not the other day, but maybe back a while ago, I was thinking about the connection. And I wish I had a board. I wish be able to show that connection, what I'm talking about. Because we are connected by a very, very fine thread.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it, but it's there. That thread comes from the top and works in here.
Mm-hmm.
But the communication lines from myself to Grandma Renee is still there because I know her now. I've known her for a while. It's kind of like the telephone lines. There's the main body, which brings all that energy to make that phone ring. And the same thing with us. We're directly connected to our Creator through that very fine thread that comes from here, goes in here, and it goes up. And every once in a while, we got to talk to Him. Because He will know. He may not answer your prayer tonight or tomorrow or next week, but it will come.
Mm-hmm.
You may not understand, you may not recognize it, but it will be there. Don't what you call it? Don't sit at the doorway and wait for him to come in the door like this. Where's my answer? Where's my answer? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It works if you believe in it.
Yeah.
The power of prayer is what it's called, the power of prayer. And that's a good thing because once we know all of that, boy, and you got to be positive too when you talk to the Creator. He's going to ask me when my time is done, when I get ready to go to that place where I'm going. when I'm ready. I'm not ready yet. I got a few cleaning bills to pay and got to go golfing some more. Creator's going to ask me, hey, Neil, Chichak, what did you do down there? Don't forget, I got it all written down. And you have to tell him exactly what you did, how you lived, how you respected, how you're able to do the things that you did to other people. Because the elders tell us this. You have to be ready to answer those questions. And I remember my aunt telling me that once too. Don't say nothing to anybody, anything bad, because it'll come back at you. She'd say. When your time comes to go, Creator's going to talk to you about that. And you think about that. And we have to remind ourselves, we have to be kind. That's in our nature. That's who we are. We are kind-hearted people. Like I said, from my good friends from the Haudenosaunee Nation to the Cree Nation, to all nations, the people that I meet. I have fun with the people. I like having fun with people. That's my connection. I can still dial a phone and say, hey, are you home? Yeah, I'm home. Can we talk? No, not right now. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Okay. But that later over here, though, when we didn't have the phones or hydro, the connection was already made because he'd go visiting from house. You want to go visit that place over there, go over that way. They'd be gone most of the night to go visiting, just to talk. Like Grandma Renee says, that to find out some news about certain things, or find out about how did you guys get this, or how did they do that, or the medicines. They talk about all that stuff, and that was the best part of that. And again, it's I wish we could go live like that, but we have to find out how we're going to do it. I think Grandma Renee alluded to it, that we have to do the things that we have to get started on, is learning how to do it all over again. That's what I'm saying. And that's about all and if we can do that, we'll be better off, because we survive. We're survivors. Mm-hmm. But we have to survive in a good way as well. Anyway, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Grandpa.
You're very welcome, my friend. Oh, my friend. So nice to see you.
So nice.
I'll be signing autographs at the June 32nd.
We'll be there
at the CFL football field on June 32nd.
Oh. You guys are amazing. There were so many, you brought memories back to so many of our listeners. When you're talking about lunch, one kid, there was the one kid got mad at the mom for sending her an uncooked bologna sandwich. So I guess that young kid gets his bologna cooked. It was so fun. And then just so many beautiful, this has really, really uplifted an awful lot of people, just by having these conversations. And, and we know, we started this just after Christmas, and, and we keep on getting so many comments of when is Grandma Renee coming back, and Grandpa Neil. So, it's just absolutely wonderful that you're here and that you spent 2 hours with us. And man, oh man, 2 hours goes by so fast. It's unbelievable. But I just really want to say thank you. And I'm glad that you like the Cree people, Neil.
I didn't say that. No, I'm
just
kidding.
You said that they're fun, that they're kind.
I'm just kidding. Did you know that I'm actually living out my life as a red man? It's my lighting, eh? It's my lighting. See, look at I'm red. Ah!
I know.
You know, when we talk about that the baloney stuff, and you know, people kind of wonder about. I had non-native friends talk to me about that, and they said, "Do you actually? That's actually what you used to eat?" I said, "Yeah." Oh crap! We used to have that breakfast, and we used to have that breakfast, lunch, and supper, because that's all my parents could afford. But we
there's your
survived.
recipe.
Or something. Oh, I remember one time my mom bought this roast, and she'd cook it up, then she'd only give us a piece, and because beef, a roast was so sacred here on the island, you know, sacred roast.
Sacred roast.
But you know, but again, like I said, you know, it's an honor and a pleasure doing talking and you know, doing the remember whens and being with my good friend Renee, Grandma Renee, and I'm hoping that you know that these continue for other people too, because you know there's a lot of stories out there, a lot of memories, and again, like I said to Grandma Renee and I were talking, the memories of the rocking chair. When I hear that squeaking sound on a rocking chair, that's really. But of course, there are other things that remind me of certain things too. So, thank you so much for the invite. I can
Thank
see
you.
all those people that are watching too. You know that, eh?
I know.
Yeah.
I can actually see them.
Where?
My third eye is open.
Yeah. I don't get sucked in anymore. There's a
You were
morsel
looking,
of
though.
me
You were
that
looking.
believes that you're telling something truthful, but you're joking. It's been really wonderful. And I think we've been talking about, is it possible to continue this?
Yes.
And, you know, invite people in, because there's just so many people that that I know that are coming forward and leaving messages, and old friends, and it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And someone that we work with the other day said that she's a principal at our school, Josie, and she said at one of our schools, and she said our youth need our grandparents. They need the grandma and grandpas right now.
Yeah.
And this is really awesome. If we could, I think we need to do this during the day in the classrooms, you know, for lunch breaks. This is really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
This is what we were doing in the high schools, was bringing in the grandparents into the school, and when I went, I was in high school off the reserve, and it was so nice when I walked down the hall. It was everyone was saying, "Hi, Grandma," "Hello, Grandma," and I would say hi, and everyone was, and no matter what nationality they were, they always just kind of smile when knowing that a grandmother was there. It made a big difference. That's what I heard in the schools, that it was a big difference for having a grandmother. And I see this is the answer. What's going to help create that new world is the grandmothers and the grandfathers sharing remember when, because this is what they need to hear, is those stories, to be resilient, not to give up, and that the continuation of resiliency, and hearing the songs and hearing the stories, and this is what this is medicine for them. That's what I've been told. So with all your prayers, the power of prayers, I know this can continue, because it is needed. This is a medicine that is needed for those that are out there that don't have grandparents.
Yeah.
And
we'll continue it.
What's that? Sorry, what did
I said we'll continue it.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Because we know that that's the answer with the grandparents, and you've said it numerous times, Grandma Renee. You know that, and how many people need grandparents and need to have people to listen and just to be in space, right? Space and place of remember when, because it brings back those memories, like even that rickety, the rocking chair, right? The June bugs slapping on the screen in the summertime, and where people are, right? It's all those things that you remember, and you can almost smell it, right? The smell of the summer or the June bugs and what it sounds like with them hitting the screen, and it's just so beautiful to have these stories and people coming together and having and people spending time with us and really reconnecting, because an awful lot of people are looking for a path of reconnection, a path of revitalization, and a path that to find themselves to the culture. Because Neil, I too never grew up. I never grew up with my culture, but being surrounded by all you wonderful people has bringing me such a warm sense in my heart that I am home. I'm home every single time that we have tea with Totah. I'm home every single time that we have conversations with other people. So, this is bringing me home as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for you being here.
You're very welcome.
Welcome.
It's
Are we
so
done?
lovely. Yeah, we're done. We're done.
Yeah, good night, everyone.
We're done like baloney.
We're done
bologna.
by like fried
Yeah.
bologna.
Did you see your recipe?
Yeah, I saw the link. I mean, I'll
Grandpa
share that
Neil?
actually
Your recipe for the
with gravy. It even has the gravy. That's from Kristen. You know Kristen, actually, if you saw her, she's one of the teachers and an amazing champion for the work that we do here in Halton. And it's really important work that we're doing. And Sherry wrote a really beautiful. We've been really trying to put on our website, what we're creating. And what's been so beautiful about the work that we're doing is that we really are being guided by spirit and the grandmas and the creator is just, set us up. It's like this amazing board game of our life, and we're just taking turns and jumping squares and meeting people, and it's really full of magic and beauty. And if it wasn't for our elders who are really believing in us and supporting us and keeping us healthy and teaching us that, while you had your talk here, I went for a long walk. That's what I did.
Good.
I knew I've been spending a lot of time in this space and what we're doing and creating. And I just knew I felt good enough to say, yes, I can leave the computer running and know everything's going to be safe. And that's what you all create. You create that for so many people. And I'm just really blessed to be in this. So Neil, check your calendar, because it's always you that we're waiting for to get back to us on.
What, me? Okay, Grandma Renee, come on now. Okay, when is the next planning date?
Whatever you all want, whenever you want. So
I'll
we'll
try to get a hold of Grandma Renee and we'll work out a date.
Awesome.
Yes.
And I'll teach that Mungai Pungai Jiggy Jiggy Jungai song.
Yes. I'm down. Let's do it. Hopefully we can do it outside.
Did you see my motion, how big the ice was? With my arms? I went like this, and the screen never seen my arms, eh? Oh my God.
like this.
Yeah.
My cheeks hurt. They're just like stuck like that. When
Hey, look at that. Look at all the extra wrinkles I got. I got a receding hairline. I can't pull my ponytail anymore.
You better let it loose a bit.
I'm going to grow these. I think. Push them back. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.